We asked you earlier, knowing what you know, right? You know Embiid's hurt. My dad was like, I got to tell you, man, I'm really disheartened by this Joel Embiid news. I said, yeah, it sucks. Well, what else are you supposed to do? You have this guy. You're just going to pass on him? Cleveland did that. Milwaukee did that. There was nobody else in that draft worth taking at that spot. You got to take Joel Embiid. So, yeah, you got to take the good with the bad there. We don't know when Joel Embiid will return. I know Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. You always say, I don't care what the teams tell me about injuries, but do you, Mike, think that we will see Joel Embiid in this Hawks series?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, the meniscus tear is usually about a 3-week injury, right? The series, if it goes 7 games, is probably 2 weeks, so it's right on that borderline. Maybe he can come back sooner. I know he worked out before Game 5, and I'm also of the opinion that professional sports teams do nothing by accident. So they had Embiid out there going through drills. He could have gone through those drills at the Camden training facility, out of the way, with nobody seeing him that afternoon. He could have gone through those drills at the Wells Fargo Center before the press and the crowd got in the arena. He was out there, a half hour before tip-off working out. So maybe that was a message that says, hey, this isn't as bad as it sounds, or I'll be back sooner. Who knows? But when it comes to injuries, again, like I always say, when he's out there, he's out there. Until then, he's not playing, and that could be a bit of a problem for the Sixers.
So let's say he's out Sunday. What does that matchup look like in your mind? When you saw the Hawks, I'm sure you watched a lot of that Hawks series. You know the Sixers very well. So the Sixers are a different bunch. When they know they're going into the game without Embiid, they look way different on Game 5 than they did in Game 4 when he went out. It's a different mentality. It's a different game plan. So how does that stack up with what you see from the Hawks? You watch that series with the Knicks.
Well, obviously, when Embiid's out there, there's not a team in the NBA that he doesn't present a problem for defensively and offensively. First thing I think of, before you even get to the offense, let's talk defense. Let's talk rim protection against Trae Young, against John Collins, against lobs to Clint Capella, basically like that. So I think rim protection, number one, and offensively, I mean, he is the Sixers' number one option. He's 30 points a game. Now you have a guy like Clint Capella, Atlanta center, who's a tremendous shot blocker. If Embiid's out there, he's got to focus on Embiid, right? He can't leave Embiid. If Embiid's not out there, maybe he can wander a little bit. Maybe he can contest drives to the basket. Maybe he's more active on the defensive end, and that really emphasizes what he does well. So, like you said, I think without Embiid, it's a big difference on the offensive and defensive end of the floor.
Sure is. Now, there's no question about that. They used Simmons as almost a 5 the other night. I mean, he was basically playing the 5 spot. That in this situation, he would be defending like Clint Capella in that spot, right? I mean, is that something that diminishes what – that's the problem. You take him off of what he does great on the perimeter and move him to have to defend a lesser offensive player. It kind of takes a little bit away of what Simmons specializes in.
Right, absolutely. And you hit on something there that's going to be, I think, a big difference that fans will see in this series as opposed to the Wizards series. You're not going to see in this series, or you shouldn't see much of, a 6'10 Ben Simmons driving against a 6'2 Ish Smith. You're not going to see a 6'8 Tobias Harris backing down a 6'4 Russell Westbrook. The Hawks have some size. Yeah, Trae Young is 6'2", but Bogdanovich is 6'6". DeAndre Hunter is 6'8". John Collins is 6'8", 6'9". Capella is 6'10", 6'11". So you're not going to see the Sixers get the mismatches that they got in the Wizards series against the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, that's we were talking a little bit about their size difference. They present a lot more challenges, and they can kind of try to throw different looks and mix stuff up at Ben where he's not going. They are surely not going to put Trae Young on him and just let him back Trae Young down. So, yeah, Ben is not going to have the looks in the one-on-one spot. But one area is, Mike, this team is much more deep in terms of options to score. Young is the man, but they have 4 or 5 guys that can put the ball in the basket. And Washington just didn't have that.
Right. Don't sleep on Bogdanovich. When he came back in March, Here's a little thing. They changed coaches on March 1st, right? They brought in Nate McMillan, and I think they're 31-12 since that change. But you know who also came back on March 1st was Bogdanovich. So he's a 6'6" shooter, and he can also create some offense. And then off the bench, they bring Danilo Gallinari, a 6'10" guy off the bench. Now, he had some good games against the Knicks. He had some bad games against the Knicks. But there's a guy who is – average 17, 18, 19 points in the NBA. So they're bringing a legitimate scorer off the bench too. This Hawks is, all they lack really is playoff experience. Now that's a big thing to lack, but when you look at them, they kind of remind me of where the Sixers were in 2018.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Now, one other thing, like they don't really have they have their star. And I don't know if Trae Young is the best player on the team that wins the title, but they don't really have that. He doesn't have a running mate yet.
Yeah, they don't have a Robin guy, a Pippen to a Jordan, that type of deal, an Anthony Davis to a LeBron, a Simmons to Embiid, that type of situation. They have Trae Young and a bunch of good guys around him. Now, can those guys be John Collins and DeAndre Hunter as they get older? Maybe, but as of right now, I think you're right. But on the other hand, Trae Young is just playing, incredible basketball right now. And at this point, at least against the Knicks, he was able to create a shot for himself or his teammates every time down the floor, just about.
Yeah, that's one big difference is they don't have right now offensively. Now, that second guy that, even like Giannis has Middleton, he's got Drew Holiday. They don't have that guy really yet. Their guys are kind of like the C-level scorers as opposed to the high level. Yeah. But
when Embiid's not out there, that would be an advantage the Sixers would have. But if Embiid's not out there, then that becomes less of a weakness because the Sixers' number one guy isn't out there.
Oh, absolutely. Now, here's a question that, is interesting because, Mike, against the Knicks, you would think the Hawks were this great defensive team. Right. Are they a good defensive team or are the Knicks that bad? Like when you look at the Sixers and say, hey, how are you going to score? This team did a really good job defensively. They're not a great defensive team. They're not a Wizards defensive team, though.
Right. Nate McMillan has the reputation of being an excellent defensive coach, especially a coach who's able to slow teams down in transition and really play good transition defense. But you're 100% right. The Knicks got exposed in the playoffs. Their inability, and I'm one, as I've said on this show many times, I think playoff success is based around having players who can create shots for themselves and their teammates, especially in the fourth quarter. And the Knicks just didn't have those guys. So those isolations that they ran for Randall during the regular season that worked so well, when you get into a series and you scout a team and you play a team several times, well, every time Randall caught the ball and tried to run one of those isolations, he saw 4 Atlantic Hawks shirts shading his way. So he was really the Knicks' only primary scorer. So they really took him out of the game, and the Knicks had nothing left to counter it with. So granted, the Atlanta Hawks are not a great defensive team. I think that was more of them exposing the Knicks more than anything else.
Mike, what'd you see in Game 5 that would make you say they didn't have Embiid, but they did this, they should be all right?
I think the scoring from a lot of people, right? I think Seth Curry getting, involved and being a more active part of the offense. I think Tobias Harris rebounding and playing a better game. I think Ben Simmons, being more aggressive on offense. But I still think without Embiid, I would still pick the Sixers to win. But, this is a tough series. Right? If Embiid was there, I think this would be like 2018. But with the Hawks playing the role of the Sixers and the Sixers playing the role of the Celtics, I think you'd be looking at 5 games, some close games, maybe one goes to overtime, but I think it'd be 4-1 Sixers. Without Embiid there, I mean, it's going to be a slog, I think.
Oddly enough, in 4 games without Embiid in the playoffs, the Sixers are 3-1. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that, but, we'll see what happens this time. I believe some of those games was probably Brooklyn and early in the Miami series.
They beat the Heat that first year when he had the orbital bone problem, and they won those couple games. And in those games, Ben Simmons averages about 23 points a game. When Joel plays, He only averages about 13, obviously, the touches and yada, yada. But, the other night we saw Ben Simmons score 19. He had the triple-double. You wonder if he gives you that type of game without Joel Embiid, how far can that group go in these playoffs? I mean, obviously, to get by Brooklyn or Milwaukee, I don't think that's enough.
Yeah, I don't think that's enough, and I think he's going to have to play like that to get them by Atlanta if Embiid doesn't play. You remember in 2018 when Embiid didn't play those games, they didn't have Embiid the last part of that regular season, and they were flying in the regular season. Yeah. I mean, Simmons was all over the place with shooters. They were incredible. And then I think they went in the Miami series. They stubbed their toe in one of the games, and then they brought Embiid back in the face mask the next game to sort of close Miami out or get past Miami. That's the key thing, right? Embiid, and one of everybody's for Simmons rather is the complaints people have him is when Embiid's out, you get the same Ben Simmons game you get when he's in. Well, you're going to need more points out of him like he did the other night.
Mike, I want to ask you real quick about this Knicks thing. Everybody's excited. They're back. They were the 4 seed, which is probably inflated because they play hard in the regular season. They don't rest guys. Do you not see a team that's kind of just stuck where they are? I mean, outside of doing something they haven't been able to do in pretty much my life, get a free agent to go there or draft someone that changes the franchise around, I don't know how that team gets out of where they are.
Well, I think you got to give them a chance because they've got new management, right? They've got Rosen from Cherry Hill. They got Worldwide West. They have a South Jersey connection. So I would urge people to adopt the Knicks. I mean, they're practically a hometown team, basically.
No, and that we're not going to start pushing.
But, I think this year, although they definitely have some limitations, and I've said all along, they won a lot of games in the regular season because they played defense and played harder. I think I saw where Randall and R.J. Barrett were among the NBA minutes leaders, and this was a year when a lot of players skipped games, as we know. But I think the Knicks, this is a positive for the Knicks. It sort of resets them. It gives them a new attitude going forward. And they do have 5 first-round draft choices in the next couple of years, as well as $60-something million in cap space. So you're correct. They haven't always utilized those assets in the past, but they have the assets to build on what they have now. And I know Knicks fans would say maybe they're where the Brooklyn Nets were in 2019.
All right, Mike McGarry, got about a minute to go, but baseball playoffs starting tomorrow. I'm imagining you're going to be in the car a lot.
Yeah, 2 games tomorrow. I just saw I'll be out at St. Augustine early, and then over at Ocean City in the afternoon, 3:00 Group 3 game, Lacey Township at Ocean City. I know you'll be doing play-by-play on Triton at Mainland game as we hit public school quarterfinals and the first round of non-publics, really picking it up in the high school scene with the baseball, the softball, the track and field, lacrosse, spring, everything comes to a head at once, basically.
AC Press McGarry for all the stuff. His must-win column, a couple of good ones. One has a tie to Coach K. Check that one out. And, of course, that is in the pressofatlanticcity.com at AC Press McGarry. All right, Mike. Well, you'll be driving around all weekend. Are you going to be in Philly on Sunday?
Yes, I will be there for game 1, yes.
All right. Mike McGarry, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and you can get his Sixers coverage at thepressofatlanticcity.com. All right, Mike, thanks, man.
All right, we'll see you on the road. Thanks.
All right. He will be back on Monday to recap it all with us here on the Sports Bash.